begin.
Welcome, everybody. This is so exciting. Welcome to Activate 2024, United Latinas Annual International Women's Month Summit. We're excited to welcome everybody.
Welcome, welcome. Say welcome on the chat. Let us know where you're coming from. Remember, this is all about building community with each other and connecting with each other. Remember to drop your LinkedIns or wherever you want us to connect with you and between each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this event is about getting everyone to activate. What does that mean, to activate? To take us from intention, from dreaming to actionable steps. We want to get everybody because we're Latinas, I know for a fact that all of us have multiple dreams. And for many of us, you have been laying them sitting dormant on the back burner for the right time to execute. But right now is the right time. Today is the right time. And that's what we're calling into action. There is no better time than this moment to make sure that we are putting into place the execution of our dreams. Correct, Ileana?
Absolutely. And whatever happened in the past, even yesterday, is in the past. What we have in our control is what we're going to do right now and how we're going to move into the future. I mean, who would have thought 5 years ago that we would be joined all together? Doesn't matter where we are, Chicago, Worcester, New Bedford, Arizona, Chile, and you, Sandra, in Florida, and me here in Rhode Island, and we would be sharing a beautiful, beautiful space of empowerment, inspiration, and just a whole lot of good vibes.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So for those of you, we get asked oftentimes, what is United Latinas? What is it? What do you guys do? How do you guys impact? How are you guys in the market? So I want to just briefly give a high level overview and then invite you to join us into our community inside our hub. But United Latinas was started on the vision of wanting to see more Latinas in the workforce move up the ladder, right? Many of us, and I've observed, and maybe you have to have observed women in the workplace, maybe just staying low key. That's their position. They're comfortable. That's what they're at. And that's what works for them, right? But we want to encourage you to see opportunities beyond what you feel is comfortable, right? Moving yourself outside of comfort zone, because as Latinas, we are ambitious, we are go-getters, we are problem solvers, and we need more problems to solve. There's plenty of problems in the world, but we're staying too low key. And I'm talking about all of us, including myself. We're not going to the most of our ability. And I want to encourage today to be a thought process, a mind process of how are we living our lives and how are we going after and doing the change that we want to see in this world. So that is what Activate is about, getting you guys not just galvanized, but also with throughout the speakers, you're going to learn some tools, some resources that are really going to take you to the place that you want to go, because we want to see Latinas stop having these dreams sitting on the back burner and execute, because you can. Y ahora con comunidad, you can do even further. Stop working in your own individual silos, come together as a community, and let's build what we all know can be built. So welcome.
And the reality is we are very smart. We're very savvy. We're very assertive. We're go-getters and we get things done. However, it's not a secret, Sandra. It's out there. We are not getting paid enough as everybody else. That's a reality. We just had equal pay day for all women last week. But did you know that for Latinas, equal pay day this year is going to be in October? In October. That means that we have to work almost twice as hard just to get the same amount for equal work that somebody else does. And the reason is not because we're not smart or powerful or we can do things. It's because we don't have the resources, the connection, the mentorship, the access. And that's what today is also about, to be able to provide part of that information, and then through United Latinas, through the hub, through this community, continue to create that for each other, because together we're definitely going to be able to get to that equal pay day that starts in January, like for other people.
Yes. Absolutely. And for those of you who are not inside our hub and our community hub, please join that, unitedlatinas.mn.co. We invite you to do that. You'll find Latinas near you across the country, across continents, that are there, that want to engage and communicate with us, right? When I was starting in the corporate world, I was the only Latina in a leadership position. We want to encourage all of us to walk into a space where we see many of us rising. And that kind of goes back to what United Latinas is, our programming, the types of things that we put on, the types of events that we have, the Latina Speakers Club, which is being shown to help Latinas really feel comfortable and courageous to use their voice, to speak up, to write a chapter in a book, which we'll talk more about later. But to do these things, we need to be the support for each other because no one else is. And sometimes you are inundated with your day to day or your home life that you forget that you need sisters, not just that are going to say, that's a great shirt, I like the color, but saying, sister, you need to go after that promotion, or you do deserve this thing, or you know what, you should pursue an entrepreneurial because what you do here is amazing, right? We need to encourage each other to really build the companies, the organizations, the atmospheres that we want. And that is what we do at United Latinas through our speakers club, through our leadership programs, through our business development and entrepreneurial tools that we have coming. It's exciting.
Very exciting. So let's get this going. We want to bring up onto the virtual stage our first speaker, our keynote speaker that I know and I'm sure will get us going, Ileana Musa. We can't be more thankful and grateful to have you here and just to get this activation going. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Awesome. My pleasure, Sandra, Ileana. First of all, congratulations. If we were all in person, I'm sure you could hear the cheering in terms of the overall support from all of the women, all of the allies that are tuning in or will tune in at a later time. But this is incredibly important. It is International Women's Month. And I always start there because as we think and reflect, what is the month about? It's not just thinking about the social, economic, cultural impact that women are having around the globe, because after all, over 50% of our planet is female. That's pretty important and meaningful. So we cannot continue to drive success and impact if over 50% of the population is not in the game. And as for Latinas, it's the same thing. We have over 60 million strong Latinos in this country. GDP on its own could be the 5th largest country in the world. And so I want our conversation today to be about our collective opportunity and power in terms of impact and change. And that's incumbent upon all of us because there's a lot of research and information out there on what others need to do. But I want to anchor us all today on what we can do. And that's, as I thought about your theme of activation, to me, that's what it's all about. So what I want to do is I'm going to encourage all of you to use the Q&A chat, because as I'm sharing some nuggets about my journey, my experiences, and best practices that you can all reflect on and hopefully put to good use, I also want to hear from you. And so Ileana and Sandra have agreed to tee up some of those questions for me as I'm going along. But want this to be interactive. I want us to have fun, because at the end of the day, everything we're going to talk about is going to energize all of you to wrap up today's summit and think and reflect. What are the 2 to 3 things you're going to take away and actually do? So with that, by way of background, as I said, my name is Ileana Musa. I work at Morgan Stanley. I've been here for about 6 years. I am in a new role as of 3 weeks ago. So I'm continuing to head up international banking and lending, but I'm also heading up national sales. So think about the private bank at Morgan Stanley. I lead those efforts at a national level, while also thinking about the clients outside of the US that do business with us here at Morgan Stanley. And they trust us to help them plan their financial legacy, which is a big responsibility and also a lot of fun from a cultural standpoint. So here's what I would say. I want to tell you a little bit about my journey because it's quite unique. I am an immigrant. I came to the United States at almost the age of 4 after living in Spain for about 3 years. I was born in Cuba. And as a result of circumstances, my parents had to split up My father couldn't leave Cuba. And so I was raised by a single mom as a result of that. And what my mother always reminded us growing up, which really shaped me as an individual, as a woman, as a Latina, is to develop a negotiation mindset. And what I mean by that is at a very young age, my mother would always anchor on the phrase, a no, ya lo tienes, which means lean in and go for it because you have a 50% shot at getting a yes. And if you don't ask, you're guaranteed a no. So this whole philosophy of abundance in terms of leaning in and going for what you want is something that I observed by a woman that worked multiple jobs, that was evicted, that had to pull herself back up time and time again to go after it until she got her yes. And so that has really shaped me and quite frankly, transformed me as a teenager and as a young adult leading up to my arrival on Wall Street. And I'll talk about that in a moment. I also learned at a very young age, and many of you probably they're tuning in don't remember, but we used to use yellow pages. And I remember every year when the new yellow pages were being dropped on our front lawn, when the mailman came by, my mother was laser focused on making sure we picked up the new edition because that was her Rolodex. And that became incredibly important because she also taught us that building a network that could be there as a resource for you, not just in terms of what you could get, but in terms of what you could give, was a very powerful tool throughout our entire lives. And so throughout this entire time, I was very creative, very innovative growing up in Miami. And I thought I was going to be a professional dancer. That was my aspiration. I was in a cheerleader. I was in a dance troupe. And so I was going to study dance. But fast forward, I ended up meeting my father at the age of 17. I was in high school. And that was a pivotal moment in my life because I met this human being who I had lost contact with at a very young age. And he was an incredible influence on me. And he convinced me to major in finance and minor in dance. And while my mother was leaning in as an entrepreneur in terms of going for the bigger and the vision, my father at the same time had very similar characteristics. He was also an entrepreneur, started a business in his 60s. And so that was an incredible influence on me. And that's what got me on my way to study finance and then later pursue my MBA. And he would always say to remember to sell what people need most. And so this whole notion of thinking about this negotiation mindset through the lens of what people need, and as a result of that, solving that need and getting what you want, really prepared me to continue to ask for what I needed as I started my career on Wall Street. And so my upbringing was, you know, I call it, it was a master class in R&R. Most people think about rest and relaxation. For me, it was all about resilience and risk-taking. And as I went through my journey, I would add two more, which is relationships and results. Those 4 R's have served me very, very well. Resilience, risk-taking, relationships, and results. And not in that order, because as we start our career, building a track record becomes incredibly important into everything we do. It is the foundation that allows us to then go for bigger and to ask for more. And so as a first-gen student, which I know some of you tuning in are, I was also incredibly grateful throughout my entire journey as it relates to being able to give back and understanding the value of an education. And I've never forgotten that. I sit on a couple of boards at Florida International University and the University of Miami because having access to an education is really the first step and the catalyst to being able to do more. And so look, by the time I got my MBA, I moved to New York. My husband was in the arts and I swore I would be there for a year. I ended up staying 14. And that was my first big move to try to break into Wall Street. I had a resume with 6 years of real estate experience. I had been in Russia where my husband was studying, where I worked at a spa teaching aerobics. I was into fitness back in the day, and I arrived not knowing how I was going to do it. However, that whole access to the network put me, because I made a lot of calls and a lot of connections, got with a recruiter that introduced me to Bank Boston, and that's how I landed my first role. And so my first tip to all of you is the importance of communicating your value through the lens of what's in it for the other party. I did that with the head of the division that I interviewed for, Ricardo Carrasco, in terms of what was his vision, what did he need for the next 3 years. And then, you know, I turned it on its head and talked about how I could help solve that for him. Part one. Part two is, what was my vision? Ileana Musa from Little Havana, with the CV that I showed up with a borrowed suit, playing the role, but articulating my vision for the future. And so as you think about communicating your value, it's also painting a picture. Even in the role that you're in now, as you're having conversations with a manager, with a business partner, with your family, what is that vision for the future? I call it la gotica de agua, just continuing to drip and positioning yourself in a bigger world, in that next opportunity that you want to seek, because you'd be surprised at how that comes around at a later time to give you access to those opportunities. So that got me on my way. The second tip I want to share with all of you is the importance of preparation. And so as we think about what we want to go for, being over prepared. I always talk about over preparation. I've been in this business 23 years. I still over prepare. When I get a seat at the table, I want to make sure I use my voice at that table, and then I've got the facts. And so I've made it a point to become an expert in the industry and in the businesses that I've had the privilege to lead. And I'd encourage all of you to do your homework, to connect with folks in the industry, because that is going to differentiate yourself. When I talk about building a track record, this is really important in making your mark, because as you are at those tables, folks need your insights, they need your intel, and that we control. So as you can tell, all of these tidbits of information I'm sharing with you are things that we control, that we can do, and that's the name of the game. And so 10 years into this career, I've now worked at 3 major banks, going from Bank Boston to Chase Manhattan Bank to JP Morgan Chase. You know, I took on broader roles. I continue to share my vision for wanting to work in international markets, lead broader teams. I knew I had a knack for leading, for transforming. Again, my childhood was one of creativity, innovation, and having to solve problems. I was a problem solver. And so I had this, this energy around lending my talent to bigger efforts. And I would always talk about winning in the marketplace, winning as a team, winning as individuals. And so that excitement, that philosophy of abundance, that optimism is so important to culture in any role that you're in. And so I always say I could teach anybody technical skills, but attitude is a whole other ball of wax. And so having the right attitude and being the change agent that companies need today will help you stand out. The other thing I would share with all of you is the importance of failing forward. You know, 15 years into my career, I had been through, I don't know, over 8 mergers and acquisitions, restructuring, new roles, being asked to go do something else. And so that resilience around staying in the game is really important. And it means that we have to be comfortable with failure. I call it setbacks and I call it failing forward. Because the first time that happened to me, I dwelled on it. I retracted, if I'm going to be honest. And it required that I reflect and really think about what it's going to take to go back at it in a bigger way. And so as you fail forward, it means that you learn, you don't dwell, you're very objective, you tap that network that you now have to help you maintain your objectivity, because when the going gets tough, oftentimes we lose it. And so you want those individuals in your network that are not going to sugarcoat, that you can trust, that you have the confidence to understand, and they're going to keep you straight. They're going to keep you in the game, and they're going to help you reframe and have that right mindset to go back at it. And then finally, don't take it personal. You know, as I transitioned from roles to roles, I had managers, new managers, that thought about me for certain opportunities. And sometimes I scratch my head and reflect and say, they don't really understand my value. They don't know what I've done. However, you have to go back at it. And so had many conversations. Let's go out for coffee. Tell me what you're thinking about the next phase of this business, your new role, what's important to you. That was always a starting place. What's in it for them? And then I would start to talk about my journey, my experiences, and how I can help achieve that, that vision for them. And so that is critically important, which is to not take it personally, because remember, the name of the game is to transition from conflicting interests that we think it's a win and lose, to common interest where it is a win-win. So many of the managers I had weren't thinking about me for the roles, but that vision, that picture I painted for them has allowed me to continue to transition into bigger roles, to manage businesses with billions of assets under management, hundreds of millions in revenue, and ultimately being able to navigate the unknown, getting comfortable with that risk taking I talked about. Saying yes, even when you don't have all the answers, because at the end of the day, you'll get the right answers as you go along. You'll leverage your network, but we need to raise our hand because we know there's a great book, Women Don't Ask. Women do not raise their hand as often as our male colleagues do. And as a result, if you raise your hand more often and you become a subject matter expert, you're going to get more noticed and you're going to get those stretch assignments. So we need to be bolder and be willing to take that risk as we move forward. The last couple of things I want to share with you is the opportunity. I talked about it on the front end, but I'd be remiss to not anchor us all on the Latino opportunity. There is power in numbers, and we are over 60 million strong, as I said, 2.8 trillion in GDP. Over 50% of our cohort is female. We have Latinas in this country that are attaining higher education levels, more roles in terms of cross-industry, cross-sector. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to think about that power and how do we unleash it strategically. My mother always showed me that when women succeed, everybody succeeds. Why? Because we reinvest. We reinvest in our families, in our communities. We're constantly thinking about others. And that has an economic effect in our communities. And so the more we earn, the better we do, the broader impact we can talk about and drive in our communities and in the jobs where, in the workplaces where we spend most of our time. And I don't know if it was Sandra or Ileana that talked about the Latina Equal Pay Day, but this is part of the equation because it's not just that we're earning 57 cents on the dollar, it's that over a 40-year career, that translates to $1.2 million. And if I now start to give you the stats on what would happen to that money if you invested it, it's a much bigger figure. And so the economy is losing out when we don't earn our fair share. But that gets to sort of my third tip, which is how do we, if you think about this economic power, you would think that it's incumbent upon all of us to do more, to unleash it, and yet we're not. And so what is getting in the way of us doing more? And I want to focus on three things. The last thing I want to share with all of you, which is number one, your financial philosophy. And that's a choice. A negotiation mindset is a choice. We have to wake up every day knowing that we want to negotiate. And so I always say practice when the stakes are low so that you're ready when the stakes are high, which means negotiate at home, negotiate at work with your team, and think about that trade where it's going to be a win-win, but you get what you need in terms of not just financially, but also time. We're very strained on time. We don't have enough time to focus on our development, to focus on us. And so when I think about negotiation, it's with a capital N in terms of all aspects of our lives that allow us to have more capacity to focus on us and continue to develop. The other thing I would share with you is, as it relates to unleashing that power, is the negotiation mindset, the financial philosophy, going for positions of power. There's a great study, Women Don't Ask, that we're going to post for all of you, that I encourage all of you to read. It's a global study in terms of what do women feel are the consequences in terms of going for bigger roles, bigger opportunities. And 60% of the women polled in this study felt that the burdens of leadership outweigh the benefits. That's more than half who believe that the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So I want us all to think about how that is the complete opposite, because as you go for positions of power, you actually have the flexibility, you get to change the rules, and you create new paths for women and Latinas coming behind you. And if you think about the top reasons, too much visibility, time crunch, fear of failure, going back to what I shared, having to delegate, and thinking that there's too much of a trade between family and work. And so what I'm sharing with all of you is for us to unleash that power, we need to continue to lean in and go for those positions, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out for us, we can make a move and pursue a different role. Finally, I think a lot about gratitude. we are all incredibly lucky. You know, our mothers, our grandmothers, all of the heroines that came ahead of us that really undreamt what we are all experiencing and living today. And so the power of one person deciding to make a difference is so impactful. It has been in my life, and I always reflect on that. And so I remember at a young age, at our dinner table once a month, we used to prepare care packages to send back to our family in Cuba because everybody stayed behind. My mother was the only one that was able to leave. And so, you know, the innovation, the creativity, making all of these items look new, because that's the only thing they would accept, putting food items in shampoo bottles to try to get food through. And then, you know, we were sitting on pins and needles waiting to make sure that everything got there. And so even though there was a struggle, there was always a philosophy of giving back and making sure that we'd open doors for others. And that has stayed with me. And so I would encourage all of you, do not underestimate the power that each of you have to drive change and impact in the communities that you work, in the workplaces where you're thriving, because behind you, there's always a woman, a Latina, a colleague that's watching, that you have an opportunity to impact their life in very meaningful ways. And finally, I want to leave you with the mantra I always share with my daughter, Bella. She's 11 years old. She's a Girl Scout. She's my inspiration every single day, which is regularly take personal risks. That's what I shared at the beginning. Number 2, never hesitate to ask for what you need. I used to say ask for help. I've reframed that. Ask for what you need. The more specific we are, the better. Use your influence, as I just said, because we all have it. It doesn't matter what title, what role you're in, you have the influence to drive change and positive impact. And then finally, never forget where you came from. We all have such unique stories that when we share it with others in a professional setting, it allows us to have a much deeper connection. And when we do, it allows us to accomplish more together because people recognize we're on the same side of the table. So with that, I am going to pause and pull in Ileana and Sandra back with us.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. So many nuggets. We dropped as many as we could on the chat to make sure that they're immortalized there. Everybody has the ability, by the way, to save the chat so that you can save the connections, you can save the nuggets, you can save the actions, the tips, everything. Because I know that we want to be present listening to all of our speakers, to listening to you, Ileana, but we also need to have that separate information. Thank you so much. I don't even know where to start. Like, I have so many follow-up questions, but I also know that we have amazing speakers that will continue just like you to share, you know, all of these great advice and so human. I think it's important to recognize that we're still, no matter what level we are, we're still human, we're still vulnerable, we still make mistakes. I love the, you know, failing forward and feeling comfortable with that, because I think now the standards in some cases feel too high, no matter where we are. So I love that you did that and you shared that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what, on that, like, we put too much pressure on ourselves, right? Ileana and I were just talking about this prior to starting, the amount of pressure that we put on ourselves, and that is an inhibitor for many people. So it's almost like everything you shared was like, stop putting the pressure. I love that never hesitate to ask questions, ask for what we need, because how great are we at that? Probably we score really low at that. You know,
low on the spectrum. Yeah, but you know, I do it at home all the time. It drives my husband crazy, but it's how I keep honing that skill with your colleagues. But we just have to be more aware because we're constantly thinking about others and the sacrifice and giving. And we have to just negotiate and articulate why we need it. The why is so important, because when people start to connect with, you're not just going to go off on an hour, you know, to do your manicure. You're taking the time to go do this talk that I'm doing to be able to continue to build the network, because it's important to me to give back, and because I learned from other females and Latinas that are going to be speaking here. So giving the details around that vision is so important to allow people to understand why we're asking for what we need.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ileana, for being here. I know you're going to stay a couple more minutes. So if anybody
Yeah.
has questions, please feel free to